Everything you thought you knew about this case is a lie. The judge's words boomed through the cavernous courtroom, echoing off the high ceilings and marble walls. The statement sent a ripple of murmurs through the crowd, which consisted of journalists, investors, family members, and curious citizens who had descended to see the sensational trial unfold. Cameras snapped constantly, recording every reaction, every flicker of emotion, every subtle movement. All eyes snapped to the defendant, Vanessa Cole. She sat rigidly at the defense table, her posture betraying a calm she didn't feel. Vanessa had been a figure of admiration in the business world for over a decade. Her company, Cole Enterprises, was known for its innovation, its generosity to employees, and its philanthropic ventures. She had been a star of success, a woman who ascended the corporate ranks with brains and determination. But today, all that hung in the balance. Her fingers shook just barely, as she folded them in her lap, striving to give an impression of assurance. Her dark locks were styled flawlessly, her makeup flawless, but the faint tension at the corners of her eyes betrayed the tempest brewing within. Fear and anger existed alongside a resolve that was not to be defeated. She had built her empire through hard work, and now it was under threat, not because of market forces or competitors, but through accusations of theft that would bring about her downfall and destroy her life. Across the room, the prosecution team went with smooth ease. They wove a seamless story. Vanessa had supposedly diverted millions from company coffers into her own offshore accounts, concealing transactions behind the layers of intricate financial reports. Each item of evidence was precisely set out on display screens: spreadsheets, bank wire transfers, emails, and internal memos. Investors who had once trusted her absolutely were now positioned as victims, blindsided by an act of betrayal that felt almost unthinkable. The courtroom was thick with tension. Every photo, every piece of paper, every painstakingly highlighted figure weighed in against Vanessa. Journalists huddled forward, scribbling furiously. Social media outside the courtroom was already abuzz #Vanessa Cole trial, #corporate betrayal, and #embezzlement scandal trends within hours. Public sentiment was quickly turning against her, and in today's information age, perception often outstripped reality before the last verdict was even passed. But even in the midst of all this overwhelming evidence, Vanessa's defense attorney Michael Hayes was serene. A man in his early 40s with a piercing stare and a reputation for getting to the bottom of things, Michael had made a career out of defending clients the world had already found guilty. He understood the value of observation, the little hints that so often contradicted the true story. And sitting there and observing the prosecution present their careful case, something did not quite seem right. He saw the tiny disparities in the bank records, the omitted background in the emails, the manner in which some of the transactions would suddenly materialize when it benefited the prosecution. These were not errors. These were intentional exclusions. Someone had stopped at nothing to craft a history where Vanessa would look guilty. And if he didn't move fast, the jury, the judge, and the whole public would believe before the truth had even been realized. Michael leaned over to whisper to Vanessa, who nodded slightly, trusting him despite her rising panic. "Stay calm. I'll handle this," he murmured. Her lips twitched into a faint, anxious smile, but the knot in her stomach refused to loosen. She had always thought there was fairness, that hard work and integrity would defend her, but now she knew that in moneyed, powerful, and corrupt society, even the best of people could find themselves in traps they did not anticipate. The gallery paused in its collective breath as opening statements were begun by the main prosecutor. Karen had a reputation for dominating the courtroom, her voice as cutting as a scalpel. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she started, walking slowly before them, "we sit today to find out about a woman who betrayed everyone around her. The evidence is clear. The books are clear. And the effect on the victims is undeniable." She pressed a button, and there flashed across the big courtroom screens a chain of graphs illustrating the abrupt vanishing of money from Vanessa's accounts. Investors who had invested their entire life savings into her business were displayed crying in videos, their voices trembling as they narrated the ruin created by her alleged actions. The courtroom gasped as the magnitude of the alleged embezzlement sank in. Vanessa's heart pounded. She knew the truth, she was innocent. The true culprit had planned this all out, and each accusation leveled against her was a part of someone else's design. But how could she persuade a jury, a judge, and an already predisposed public that she was innocent? How could she dig up the evidence that had been concealed from her, tampered with, or fabricated? Michael held up his hand, cueing the prosecution to stop. "Your Honor," he stated firmly. "Prior to continuing, we need to account for the possibility that not everything that has been brought in here is true. Some of these documents seem real, but if we examine them further, they might have been altered or forged to build a false case against my client." There was a silence in the courtroom. The judge, who was a large man with a legendary fairness, but also a known protocol obsession, furrowed his brow. "Are you implying that the prosecution is offering false evidence?" he inquired, his voice measured but one of doubt. Michael nodded. "I am, Your Honor, and we're going to prove it." For the first time, uncertainty crept into the minds of a few people in the gallery. Could it be that the image of guilt so beautifully painted by the prosecution was actually a cover-up? Cameras were quick to catch the minute changes in expression. Jurors slightly advancing, reporters trading incredulous glances, investors murmuring among themselves. Vanessa let out a slow breath, a spark of hope flickering. Michael's confidence was infectious, even before what appeared to be overwhelming evidence. She knew the next few steps would decide everything. Each witness, each piece of paper, each filing in court could swing the pendulum between destruction and rescue. The fight for her future, reputation, and freedom was only just starting, and she was not going to allow the lies to cover up the truth. Outside, speculation roiled through the city. Headlines were already lining up: Vanessa Cole trial shock, businesswoman or traitor. The stakes were greater than ever before. Millions would analyze every aspect of the case. And at its heart, Vanessa sat, her gaze locked on Michael, hoping that in the tangled web of lies, he would unlock the key to unstitching the deceit. In that instant, one thing was certain: this courtroom would not only reveal a verdict, it would uncover secrets, betrayals, and question everything everyone believed they knew about truth and justice. And for Vanessa Cole, the battle to clear her name had barely started. The courtroom tension the following morning was charged. Vanessa was seated at the defense table, fingers entwined, knuckles white. Sleep had been a stranger the night before. She had attempted to concentrate on the plan Michael had presented, on the possibility that truth might still triumph, but the pressure of the allegations bore down upon her like an unseen chain. On the streets outside, the city seethed with gossip. Twitter feeds and Facebook streams were filled with breaking news, commentary, and determined opinion. Each second seemed to be suspended, the entire world holding its breath to see if Vanessa would break under the stress. And then the moment arrived. A court clerk walked over to the judge, holding a small, inconspicuous envelope. "Your Honor," she said, her voice firm in the face of dozens of gazes upon her. "This was anonymously delivered this morning." The judge, a somber, stoic figure with a gaze of gravitas, cocked an eyebrow. He palmed the envelope for a second, running it through his fingers as if he could feel its weight. "Anonymous, you say?" he grunted. Then, with a calculated gesture, he passed it over to the prosecution to examine before opening it in front of the court. Eyes all converged on the envelope, as the judge slowly pulled out the contents. A CD was inside with just the word, "Listen." A murmur of gasps circled the courtroom. Who had mailed it? What information could it hold? Michael Hayes slouched forward, his piercing eyes canvassing the room. Something about this did not feel like a magnanimous gift of evidence. In his past, anonymous letters in high-profile trials were hardly ever gracious. Nevertheless, this may be the break they needed, a lead that would finally untangle the web of deception surrounding Vanessa. The judge, following a few moments of consultation with both lawyers, permitted the playing of the sound recording. The courtroom was silenced, as if even the slightest whisper might break the developing revelation. Vanessa's heart was racing so severely she was terrified that it would reverberate out of the courtroom walls. All of the jurors' eyes were fixed on the screens. All the cameras were angled, set to record every reaction. The warbled voice on the tape sounded creepy, nearly mechanical from the digital tampering, but the language was understandable enough to give everyone the chill bumps. I changed the records. She didn't do this. She's innocent, but it's too late for her to prove it now. A stunned silence enveloped the room. The prosecution looked at one another uncomfortably. Karen Mitchell, the lead prosecutor, was the first to recover. Her voice, crisp and controlled, cut through the tension. Your Honor, this recording has been tampered with. There is no way to authenticate it, and I object to its being admitted as evidence. The judge slowly nodded. Objection noted, but since it could be relevant, the defense can ask for forensic examination by an expert. Michael stood up, his tone calm but authoritative. Your Honor, this recording could well be our sole hope for ascertaining the truth and proving my client innocent. We request forensic analysis immediately. The judge concurred, and an expert was brought in. In the meantime, Vanessa struggled to catch her breath. She had long suspected that there was something going on in her own company to undermine her, but to hear someone confess to faking the evidence, even in a mangled way, made the reality hurt. Her gaze flickered toward Michael, whose calmness brought her first glimmer of hope in days. Following the first inspection, the forensic expert, a detail-oriented man with a track record for revealing concealed details, stepped forward. Your Honor, the recording is real to be sure, he said, but it has been manipulated electronically to mask the identity of the speaker. But, he went on, speaking in a low voice so as not to be overheard by anyone except the judge and Michael, there are hidden hints within the background noise that might lead to the source, and perhaps even the creator of the recording. A shiver of excitement and tension coursed through Michael. This was it, the first concrete lead in weeks. The tape was not merely an anonymous message, it was a breadcrumb pointing toward the actual perpetrator. The jury shifted forward ever so slightly, feeling the sudden change of pace of the case, although none of them could even begin to comprehend the technical intricacy of what had just been unveiled. Later that day, after the courtroom had adjourned, Michael met Vanessa in a quiet corner. Her eyes, usually sharp and confident, were shadowed with fear. Michael, who could have done this? She whispered. And why? Everything I've built, everything I've worked for, it could all be gone. Michael nodded his head in slow motion. I don't know yet, but whoever is doing this is smart, and they've left nothing behind. This recording is just the first lead. We have to pursue all leads, examine all files, and trace the person framing you. And then, just like it was scripted, a tiny creased note slipped under the door to Michael's office. He retrieved it carefully. In neat, intentional script were the words, "Check the hidden files. Truth hides where no one is looking." Michael's heart pounded. This was a staged message. One person wanted him to discover something, and it might lead him to decipher the whole conspiracy. He examined the note for fingerprints or other recognizable marks, but it was spotless. The person who sent it was cautious, meticulous, and maybe monitoring his every step. For the next few hours, Michael and Vanessa went back to the firm's virtual files. They combed through thousands of documents, hunting for inconsistencies, irregularities, or anything that could point to the real perpetrator. Hours became an all-out night of sleuthing. Vanessa's fingers blurred over the keyboard, scanning access logs, timestamps, and company communications. Michael cross-checked every detail, searching for any pattern that could lead him to the manipulator. Then, hidden deep within an encrypted file, they discovered a pattern of emails and document revisions that didn't follow the normal policies. Each of the suspicious activities led back to Derek, Vanessa's trusted aide, someone who had been with the firm for years and had her complete trust. It was nearly unimaginable. Derek had access to everything, was familiar with the system from top to bottom, and had built a trail of forged evidence, intended to frame Vanessa, without revealing his own complicity. Michael leaned back, allowing the significance of the discovery to sink in. This makes sense, he whispered. Derek has been behind it all. The recording, the forged papers, the mysterious vanishing act of funds. It's all part of his scheme. Vanessa's face went white. I believed him, she breathed. He was family. How could he do this to me? Michael's jaw clenched. Betrayal like this is why we need to fight more than ever. The jury must be shown the truth, and we now have the proof to uncover him. The following morning, with the cryptic recording and the recently found documents in hand, Michael stepped into the courtroom. Cameras snapped nervously, journalists jotted down notes, and even the jurors gazed on with increased interest. The mood hung in anticipation. Today, the story that had condemned Vanessa as guilty would be opposed for the first time. As Michael stood up to address the jury with unshakable confidence, he raised the CD and the documents. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "what you are about to see and hear may astonish you. But it is most important to realize that things are not necessarily as they seem. The individual you think is responsible is not the individual who was responsible for this crime. The actual perpetrator has given us a trail, and now it is incumbent upon us to follow it." Vanessa's hands shook a little, but this time not out of fear, instead out of a guarded hope. For the first time in days, she dared to believe the tide was about to shift. The cryptic clue, the anonymous message, and Michael's dogged perseverance had cracked open a door that had been shut for too long. And in the reserved, measured way of a master tactician, Michael started to reveal the truth, step by step, document by document, clue by clue. The courtroom leaned forward, completely enthralled. The night air outside Cole Enterprises was heavy with tension, but within Vanessa Cole sensed it more intensely than ever. The firm she had built from scratch, her pride, her reputation, her legacy, had been breached by deceit. And the more she knew, the more she realized that the one person she trusted above all others was the one putting her out of business. Vanessa sat in the dim office, papers and electronic documents spread all over the desk like puzzle pieces that wouldn't fit. Michael Hayes, her defense counsel, had pored over every email, every timestamp, every access report. The more they delved, the more it became apparent. Derek, Vanessa's assistant for almost a decade, had carefully altered the records to make it seem like she had embezzled millions. Vanessa's head spun. How would someone she thought of as a co-worker, in a sense a family member, go against her so completely? Derek had always stood by her side, assisting in running the company, advising her on finances, even on personal issues. And now, all of that was turned against her. Michael finally spoke, ending the strained silence. "Vanessa, the pattern is inescapable. Derek had access to every file, every server, and every financial account. He's been covering his tracks for months, possibly years. The recording we discovered, the doctored documents, even the missing money, it all leads back to him." Vanessa's hands trembled as she processed the discovery. "Why would he do this?" she whispered. "Why would he betray me like this?" Michael's gaze was hard, calculating. Greed, ambition. He craved control of the company. He craved power, and he thought it would be the best way to get it, by framing you. The weight of the betrayal was overwhelming. Vanessa could feel a cold heaviness in her chest. This wasn't about money, it was personal. Derek had torn apart her world bit by bit, and now he was relying on her hopelessness to shut her up. The following morning, Michael and Vanessa re-prepared for court with fresh resolve. The case against Derek had to be absolute, put forward in a form that allowed no ambiguity. Each file, each email, each nuanced abnormality had to be linked, tracked back, and unequivocally attached to him. The stakes were higher than ever before. This was not simply a matter of demonstrating Vanessa's innocence. It was one of revealing the secret betrayal that risked annihilating her whole life. The courtroom was filled to capacity. Speculative whispers circulated in the air as onlookers, journalists, and even some of Vanessa's co-workers held their breaths to learn the outcome of the case. The prosecution team was confident, their faces masks of calm, but beneath, a pot of tension was bubbling. Michael's team walked in with quiet confidence, bearing the evidence that would start to shift the tide. Michael stood up to speak to the court, his voice firm, commanding respect. "Your Honor, members of the jury," he started, "the evidence so far has portrayed guilt, but appearances are indeed deceptive. Today we lift the veil on the unseen truth, one that was skillfully hidden by someone who believed that they could avoid justice." Gasps spread across the courtroom as Michael presented the emails, logs, and encrypted documents they had found. Each piece of paper was a step closer to revealing the true perpetrator. The prosecution's arrogant facade was slowly crumbling. However, they quickly attempted to brush the evidence off as circumstantial,
But Michael was not relenting. "See the pattern," he said, gesturing to a series of access logs. Every time money went missing, Derek's credentials were used. Every time emails were modified, Derek had permission to modify them. "This is not accident. This is calculated, intentional betrayal." Vanessa saw a glimmer of hope. For the first time in weeks, it almost looked like the truth might finally come out. But Michael wasn't finished yet. He summoned a witness, a reserved intern named Clara, who had gone underappreciated for months, but had witnessed Derek's suspicious activity firsthand. Clara stepped forward, her voice shaking initially, but increasing in strength with every word. "I saw Derek entering files at midnight, occasionally from computers that weren't used by anyone else," she said. "I thought it was nothing initially, but then I saw him altering numbers, transferring files, and erasing records. I didn't know what he was doing, but I knew it couldn't be right." The courtroom fell silent. Vanessa clutched the armrest of her chair, her heart racing. Clara's account, though straightforward, had put everything into perspective. Derek had manipulated the whole thing, leveraging his position of trust to conceal himself in plain sight. The betrayal was not merely economic, but also personal, a precise calculated scheme to bring down the person who had trusted him. Michael then entered more proof. Security cam footage of Derek entering restricted zones at unusual times, timestamps connecting him to each forged document, and notes in which he had suggested to third parties that Vanessa was the guilty party. The jury sat in shocked silence, the prosecution struggling to respond, but the growing evidence was inescapable. As the tension mounted, Vanessa's thoughts flashed briefly to Derek. She had worked countless late nights, in the office, strategy sessions, and one-on-ones with him. And now she saw that every smile, every gesture of loyalty, had been a facade. Betrayal was an insidious, invisible stalking beast, and she had been its prey. Michael's final argument, for this part, was accurate, unshakable. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just seen something that isn't the tale of a thief or a criminal. It is one of deception, manipulation, and betrayal. The individual who did this cloaked themselves behind our trust in them. But today the truth emerges." The atmosphere in the room was charged with tension. The jury looked at each other. There were whispers among the onlookers, and the reporters wrote energetically. Even the prosecutor appeared shaken, understanding that the story they had constructed so confidently was being threatened seriously. Vanessa was both relieved and terrified. Relieved that the truth was finally coming out, terrified because the battle was far from won. Derek had been cunning, laying traps that could still trap them if they were not careful. But for the first time, she felt that she might make it through this storm. The concealed betrayal, which was invisible and smothering, now stood revealed. The day concluded with a cliffhanger. Derek, summoned to testify the next day, sat in court with an attitude of superiority, not realizing that his carefully thought-out fraud was being dismantled. Vanessa observed him from the other side of the room, anger, disbelief, and determination in her eyes. Outside the courtroom, camera flashes lit up as reporters wondered about the explosive allegations. Social media was abuzz with speculation. The true offender exposed. Vanessa's finally got evidence. What's Derek going to say next? The anticipation was building, and the case had caught not only the courtroom but the whole city in its grip. For Vanessa, one thing was certain: the battle for justice would not be over, but now she possessed the power of knowledge, proof, and advocacy. Betrayal had been revealed, the shadow hand exposed, and the next war, the courtroom battle with Derek, would decide if truth would at last prevail. The clock crept towards the next trial session. Each second pushed them closer to confronting the man who nearly brought about Vanessa's ruin. And within that charged, wordless instant, one thing was going through her mind: no lie, however artfully spun, can ever survive the light of truth. The courtroom was charged with tension, all eyes on the action. Vanessa slumped at the defense table, hands folded tightly, knuckles whitened. Her stomach was in knots, with a combination of fear and hope. Weeks of agony, the secret betrayal finally revealed. Today would be the day of revelation, the day the true culprit would be brought to light before the jury, the judge, and all the city watching outside through media coverage and social media. Michael Hayes stood up from his chair, holding the evidence folder tightly in his grasp. His gaze swept around the courtroom, catching each juror's eye for an instant before settling on the judge. His relaxed air exuded confidence, a striking contrast to the charged atmosphere that pervaded the room. Your Honor, members of the jury, he started, his voice firm but authoritative. Today you will discover that the tale you have been hearing about Vanessa Cole is partial. You will learn that things are not always what they seem, and that the truth has been before your eyes all the while. Gasps and whispers rippled through the courtroom. The prosecution, Karen Mitchell at the helm, watched, faces well rehearsed in neutrality, but the subtle tension around their eyes gave away unease. Evidence that Michael was to produce would destroy the highly crafted fabric of Vanessa's guilt. Michael gestured to the clerk of the court, who set out a set of overnight analyzed digital documents and emails. These documents, Michael explained, laying them out before the jury, demonstrate a trend of intentional manipulation on the part of someone with complete access to Vanessa's accounts, someone with the means, the knowledge and the motivation to set her up for a crime she did not and could not have committed. He stopped, allowing his words to weigh. All the jurors leaned forward, the room electric with expectation. Cameras picked up every flutter of feeling, every droplet of perspiration, every slight change in position. Social media streams outside were already abuzz with guesswork. Then Michael called the first witness, quiet intern Clara, who had witnessed Derek's strange behavior firsthand. Clara's voice shook a little when she stepped up to take the stand, but with each statement she became stronger. I witnessed Derek tapping into financial records late one night, she told them, her eyes unflinching as they met those of the jury. He modified figures, erased files and fabricated documents to make it seem like Vanessa was at fault. I didn't realize at first, but now I see he was attempting to destroy her. The courtroom was quiet. Vanessa's heart pounded as she listened to Clara, understanding that a long-lost friend had finally come forward. Her hands folded into fists, not out of fear, but out of a building wave of determination. Justice was no longer a faraway hope. It was now in reach. Michael then produced further proof. Security footage of Derek accessing restricted areas at unusual times. Email exchanges verifying that he had planned the fictitious financial transactions. And timestamps verifying that he had been online for every key moment when accounts had been manipulated. Each item of proof followed on from the previous, making a chain of evidence that could not be dismissed. Karen Mitchell attempted to interrupt. Your Honor, we would assert that this evidence is circumstantial. The judge interrupted her brusquely. Counselor, your turn. The court will listen to the evidence as it comes. Michael went on, his tone steady but compelling. Let's deal with the facts. Derek had the opportunity, the information and the motive. Vanessa Cole, however, had no chance to commit these acts without being detected in real time. Every electronic trail, every deviation in the records, leads to Derek, not Vanessa. Vanessa's chest constricted as she listened to the testimony. The burden she had been carrying for weeks, the fear of losing everything, the despair of being falsely accused, began to shift. With every bit of evidence, every piece of testimony, she was one step closer to getting her life back. Then came the revelation moment. Michael uncovered a series of coded messages that he had cracked during the night. These were messages from Derek to an external accomplice, detailing how they would set up Vanessa and falsify the financial records. The jury gasped, the confident smirks of the prosecution crumbling. The scheme that had appeared so flawlessly executed now lay bare in every detail. Lastly, Michael summoned Derek to the witness stand. Derek strode with assurance, attempting to keep his cool, but the faint quiver in his hands showed signs of unrest. Michael spoke to him face to face. Derek, you were given responsibility for the management and care of Vanessa's business. And yet, you saw fit to do something that betrayed that trust. You manipulated documents, removed files and fabricated evidence to frame her. How do you justify that? Derek stumbled, his pride failing. I don't know what you're talking about, he stuttered. Michael waved the papers in his hand. These are your fingerprints digitally, figuratively, and literally. Each action has been followed back to you. The emails, the files, the security records, all say the same thing. You attempted to conceal yourself in plain view, but fraud cannot survive the light of day. The jury sat in stunned silence. Even the audience appeared incapable of breathing, as the extent of Derek's treachery was revealed. Vanessa looked at Michael, relief and gratitude surging within her. This was it, the moment the scales of justice would tip. Then Clara, the intern, came forward once more. She had one last piece of evidence. I also witnessed Derek attempting to manipulate everyone else. Rumors and fear spreading to isolate Vanessa. He did not want anyone questioning him or his motives. But he miscalculated our focus and our commitment to discovering the truth.
The courtroom was filled with murmurs. Flashing cameras, reporters writing at top speed, and the jury leaning forward. The tapestry of lies so painstakingly spun was coming unstitched in front of all. Michael finished presenting his argument with accuracy and vigor. Ladies and gentlemen, the one who committed these offenses was concealed behind trust, taking advantage of all possibilities to construct a misleading story. Vanessa Cole is innocent. The guilty one is right here in front of you. Justice requires the reality to be acknowledged, the betrayal uncovered, and the innocent released from this aura of suspicion. The ensuing silence was unbearable. Derek's face had gone pale, sweat breaking at his temples. The prosecution's efforts to save their case appeared to be hopeless. The evidence was incontrovertible. Vanessa took a slow breath, feeling vindication she never believed possible just days before. Michael's unyielding tactics, Clara's bravery, and the overwhelming evidence had shifted the balance. The courtroom, which was once a source of fear and condemnation, became now a platform for justice, where truth has started to prevail over falsehood. Outside the courtroom, the city waited with bated breath. The tale had caught the heart of thousands, and the news of Derek's betrayal would make headlines for days to come. Social media went into overdrive. #courtroom, revelation, #Vanessa, innocent, and #exposed betrayal were some of the hashtags that trended globally. Everybody waited with bated breath for the verdict. At the end of the day, the courtroom cleared slowly, leaving a charged environment behind. Vanessa accompanied Michael, her stride more assured, her thoughts clearer. She had weathered the tempest of deceit, but the ultimate struggle, the verdict, was yet to come. The discovery had laid bare the secret betrayal, but justice demanded one last conclusive deed. For Vanessa, there was one thing that was sure. The illumination of truth had cut through the veil of lies. Derek's well-constructed fibs had been destroyed, and the road to vindication at last lay in sight. The courtroom tomorrow would see the culmination of weeks of suspense, manipulation, and bravery. And when the jury came back with their verdict, the world would behold that lie can never quite win out over truth. The court was filled with a tension almost unbearable to bear. All eyes were upon the proceedings, every ear attuned to the faintest movement or whispered sound. Vanessa Cole remained seated at the defense table, fingers interlaced, heart pounding in her chest. Weeks of terror, anxiety, and betrayal had brought her to this moment. The secret truth had finally been told, Derek's dishonesty uncovered, and now the ultimate question hung over their heads. Would justice at last be served? On the outside, the city seethed with expectation. Media reported every step, scrolling headlines across social media screens. Vanessa Cole trial, last judgment nears. Courtroom intrigue grips city. Justice or treachery? Millions watched online, holding their breath for every turn of this salacious tale. Michael Hayes, Vanessa's steadfast defense attorney, leaned in, whispering words of reassurance. Stay calm, you've done everything right. The truth is with us now. Vanessa nodded slightly, though her stomach knotted in nervous tension. She had survived the betrayal, uncovered the evidence, and faced the courtroom with courage. But the verdict was still out of her hands. The jury had recessed hours before, and the courtroom held its breath in a tense, almost reverent quiet. Photographers shifted their cameras restlessly. Spectators spoke softly, and the prosecution team tried to keep their dignity, though their expressions betrayed tension. Each second that ticked by seemed like an eternity. At last the door opened, and the jury returned. The face of each juror was grim, unreadable. Derek, seated at the prosecution table, fidgeted uncomfortably, beads of perspiration breaking out on his forehead. The judge, stern and dignified, motioned for the court to stand. "Members of the court, have you reached a verdict?" he inquired. The foreperson rose, holding the verdict papers tightly in hand. "We have, Your Honor." Silence descended upon the room. Vanessa's heart constricted. Her fingers buried themselves in the table as she stared at Michael. His eyes expressed serenity and reassurance, but below that facade, she could feel the tension within him. The moment had come, the moment that would either destroy her life or save it. The four-person's throat was cleared. On the charges of embezzlement and financial misconduct, we, the jury, find the defendant. Vanessa's heart skipped, then plummeted, then skipped again. She hardly dared to breathe. The whole courtroom appeared frozen in time, the pressure of weeks of tension weighing down all the people present. Not guilty on all counts. The words echoed like thunder. For a moment, no one moved. Then the courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed relentlessly. And the gallery broke into murmurs of astonishment and excitement. Vanessa felt tears stream down her face, hot and relieving, as the months of fear and anxiety poured out in an overwhelming wave. Michael leaned in, whispering, "It's over. You're free. Justice has been served." Vanessa's relief was unexplainable. She had been through betrayal, public shaming, and the threat of losing everything. But the truth had triumphed, and her innocence had been at last acknowledged. Her eyes turned toward Derek, who sat silently in shock, realizing that his well-laid plans for deception had been thwarted. The arrogance in his eyes had disappeared, replaced by fear and surrender. The judge struck his gavel to regain order. This court acknowledges that Vanessa Cole was wrongly blamed. The activities of the real offender, Derek, have been revealed. This court applauds the defense for making comprehensive evidence and revealing the truth. Derek was led out of the courtroom by officers in an instant. The hushed tones of betrayal, manipulation, and greed trailed behind him like a specter. The audience, media people, and jurors were all shocked at how thoroughly he had betrayed all of them. Social media went into overdrive. Tweets like #Vanessa, innocent, #betrayal, exposed, and #justice served trended across the globe. The tale of deception, bravery, and truth enthralled millions. Vanessa rose, slowly exiting the courtroom, each step weighed down by feeling. The uncertainty, fear, and lack of sleep of the months vanished with each step. Michael stayed by her side, a comforting presence. "You did it," he said softly. "You confronted the betrayal, and didn't let it consume you." Outside the courthouse, fans waited, some holding encouragement signs. Cameras trailed her every step. Vanessa finally gave in to a real smile. Tired but victorious, she had not only endured a well-planned betrayal, but had come out stronger and more wise. As she looked back at the courthouse, Vanessa reflected on the lessons she had learned. Trust could be betrayed, appearances could deceive, and power could corrupt even those closest to you. But courage, persistence, and truth could prevail against even the most insidious schemes. Later, during a private session, Michael went through the details with Vanessa. The jury witnessed everything: the emails, the documents, the evidence of Clara, the video footage. The evidence was conclusive. Derek's scheme was brilliant, but truth triumphs over lies. Vanessa smiled, tears still shining in her eyes. I never thought that someone I trusted would go this far. But I'm glad the truth came out. And I'm glad I didn't quit." Michael smiled. "You didn't just survive, Vanessa, you took back your life. And now, you can rebuild stronger and wiser than ever before." The city gradually returned to its regular pace, but the tale continued to stay in the public mind. TV stations reran extracts of the courtroom saga. Social media commentators argued each turn and every twist, and the tale of betrayal, bravery, and final vindication inspired countless people. Vanessa Cole's name, previously soiled by suspicion, was now the epitome of strength and justice. Even afterward, Vanessa could not erase the secret betrayal, the fear, and the suspense that had ruled her life. But she also knew that without courage, determination, and relentless seeking of the truth, she could have lost everything. Derek's revelation was a harsh reminder. No matter how devious or calculated a lie can be, the truth always finds its way into the light. That night, when Vanessa came home, she gave herself a moment of silent contemplation. The courthouse, the proof, the testimonies, and the judgment, all of it had led to a moment that would determine the rest of her life. She had faced manipulation, deception, and betrayal, but she had triumphed. And deep within herself, she vowed to herself, she would keep battling for justice, defend her integrity, and make truth, and not falsehood, her guide into the future. The drama of the courtroom had been concluded. The stunning verdict read, and the city had seen a tale of suspense, betrayal, and final redemption. Vanessa Cole not only established her innocence, but also uncovered a secret betrayal no one could have envisioned. Justice had prevailed, and in its aftermath, a strong lesson was left in the midst of deception. Courage and truth will ever conquer.